Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Mediocre Alaskan. I am Jeff Lund. Doing a solo episode today. I'm down in Laramie, Wyoming with my wife who's working on her PhD. And I was trying to arrange I'm always in the process of figuring out the next podcast guests, which is one of the things that all podcasters have to deal with. I wouldn't say deal with, but you look for someone that you'd like to talk to and something about their story inspires you or something that's interesting about them and you want to try to track them down, but their schedules might not agree with yours. And so sometimes it can be a process. And I know anybody who's starting off with a podcast, you start off with some of those friends, which I did, who wanted to be on the podcast, and then you move from there. But then you want to track down some other people. It can be difficult to get the time. You send them an email or a direct message or something like that, and then it can be difficult to get them on the podcast. Or sometimes it's like a week or 2 or 3 or even like a month-long process of finally tracking that person down and getting them on. So yeah, that's part of the process. And that's as I was writing out these questions for these people, I'm tracking down. I'm going to have some awesome ones coming up with some really interesting people that have some great stories. You start to think about, what is it going to be? What do you want to ask them? And I think it's really important to take notes just to have some sort of background. And you can kind of get through some of that, talking all about their background. If you kind of get them, ask them what they want or ask them specific questions based on things that you know about them, I think you can get to a little bit more insightful conversation about things. It's a little more directed, which I think is important. But, part of the podcast is finding out what you do like. And sometimes the best stuff comes from things that you don't plan. So even though you have these questions that are kind of lined out of things that you want to hit or talk about, that free-flowing conversation is some of the best things about a podcast. So that's one of the fun things I've enjoyed about of these last 208 episodes has just been where the podcast goes. And sometimes it's more of a Q&A, and sometimes it's more just sitting down and talking. But I think it's important to have some sort of foundation. I think maybe that's the journalism background. I got a degree in journalism, and it was always about, who are you talking to and what are you trying to say? Because if you just ramble in a journalism article, it's just not going to work at all. And so the journalism part of me always wants to go to some sort of purpose, some sort of insight. Like, what am I providing to my listeners? Because I have to provide something to my readers. I've been writing a column since 2008. So I've written hundreds of columns, and each time I have to figure out what exactly I'm trying to convey. And sometimes that can be difficult because you feel like you're talking about the same thing, but what's the fresh way to communicate that? And it comes down to we're all pretty much saying the exact same thing. It's just a new way of saying it, or there's a new thing that reminds us of the same old thing. Abby and I were watching basketball last night, NBA playoffs. The Suns beat the Clippers, which was awesome. But the announcer or one of the commentators said that they were interviewing a player, and the player said that what they learned a lot from their dad was to have a short memory. And that whole short memory advice is something that, like, everyone in every sport has to have that. So that's not new. There's nothing new under the sun. I think that's the same thing with content in the outdoor industry, whether you're writing it or whether you're doing a podcast, is there's nothing really new. And so how can you convey the same old stuff in an interesting sort of way and not try to create something that's, I think this is a problem that we have, is we take these old things, we're trying to freshen them up in such a way that it just becomes almost disingenuous, where you try to be too creative and you're not actually you kind of lose that authenticity. And that authenticity is something that's the most important part. If I look at what I like to read and what I like to write, I like to read nonfiction. I like to read honest things that I can glean information from. So a lot of nonfiction. I don't read actually a lot about hunting. I read magazine articles about hunting a lot. But as far as books, I like ideas. Books about essentialism, Sebastian Junger has some good books. The Comfort Crisis was an awesome book. I can't think of the author right now, but he writes for Men's Health. Was a great book. So there's ideas that come with these things. It's not just, oh, I went hunting and I did this, or here's my story of elk. And how do you convey something? Again, what can the reader take from this? What value is being presented in this writing that I as a reader can take from it? And the same thing with the podcast. But I think we try to get overly creative with stuff and we lose some of that authenticity and some of that genuineness. As a consumer, when I look at companies, I look at the same sort of thing and I remember certain things. You remember how you're treated. And in the outdoor industry, like I tell this story often. It's in my book, A Miserable Paradise, which you can pick up on Amazon, or if you're in Alaska, you can go to Mosquito Books in Anchorage or Parnassus in Ketchikan and check that up. Or you can go to amiserableparadise.com. So there's my little plug for my book. But I remember Brad Brooks from Argali. I had called and I was just asking about packs and left a message, and he wasn't going to call me back. I knew he wasn't. But he did. He called back, and as he was packing for another trip, he gave me insight about packs, which such a profound impact, because this guy who doesn't know me, I'm some guy who's never ordered from him online, took the time while he was packing for a hunt to talk to me about packs, and that just leaves an impression. That's that authentic sort of feel, and so that had a huge impression. So now when he came out with those game bags, I bought the game bags because I know that what he values in his actions are people and insight and providing value to other people. That's just a huge thing. I felt the same way with Stone Glacier. Just the feedback right off the bat. I have a question about this, or the stays in my pack broke, and within that day, new ones were like they weren't shipped that day. They were shipped the next day, but they just addressed the problem right then. It wasn't fill out this form. It wasn't cumbersome. It wasn't huge pain. And so it just said to me as a consumer, this is a manufacturer that values customers, which is awesome. And so you definitely take that. And so you have to have that. And that's not to say that some of those other brands don't have the same thing. But you just have those experiences, and that's what makes you a customer. I think we have to look at the content that we create as writers and podcasters kind of the same way. And that is it being honest? Is it about me, or is it about providing some sort of value? And I think storytelling can hinder us a little bit, because storytelling is great. I love hearing great stories about people doing awesome stuff. But no one else was there with you when that happened. Maybe your buddy. So it can really be difficult to convey something to someone who wasn't there, and you leave out some of those details, or it's very, it was really funny for you, but it almost becomes like an inside joke. And so, and then why are you telling the story? Are you telling the story just so other people think that, you're a badass, or are you telling the story because, hey, there's something I learned, and so maybe I'm going to tell you this story of what I did as a way of helping you. Like there's a purpose. There's something that people can take from that. And I think that's a really important thing that can be lost in podcasts. And when I plan for podcasts, I got to think about, what about this person's story can be insightful. So I think it's important to listen to other people's podcasts. And then if you're going to have someone on your podcast that has been on other podcasts, listen to the questions that are asked, and then ask them different questions. Like, you don't want to be the 500th person to ask Randy Newberg how he got started. That's what I like about people who kind of have that rapport. They ask questions that that are different. I think that's interesting, and that's why I like listening to. I'm hesitant sometimes to listen to some of those big names when they're on podcasts, because is it going to be everything that I've heard before, or is there going to be some new insight? And when you look at people who've been in the industry for such a long time, they have such great stories. And the people who can get at those specific details are awesome. I remember listening to Chad Riker on Backcountry Rookies, and he was asking Randy about his college days and how he was down in Arizona. And I'd seen some of of Randy's shows, and I know he's mentioned that there before, but that was such an interesting, like, little tidbit, because he knew Randy enough. He was able to get those details that not everybody gets out, right? So someone's been on the podcast 10, 15, 20 times, and you hear the same thing over and over again. That's great, but how can you get out those details that are super interesting and super valuable? Because a lot of people don't know what's valuable and what's not about their story. Like if I talk about, growing up in Klawock, Alaska, and not hunting, and why didn't I hunt? If someone just glosses over that, I just didn't hunt because I fished. And then, if someone dives deeper, and when I dived deeper, I look back and I think about all those memories I could have had with my dad. And I remember a few years before he passed away, I looked back at, we had some good fishing memories, but I just thought about all those father-son, moments that we could have had. And so I really wanted to have some more of those. And so he and I had started to plan, just going on spring bear hunt. We're not going to get anything, but let's spend some time out in the woods together. But that stuff never happened, and so rather than, okay, Jeff, you grew up in Klawock and you didn't hunt. Oh, that's weird. That's crazy. Well, what did that mean? And when I think more about that and I investigate that, and when I write about those sort of things, I think just how important it would be for other people, and how I would encourage them to have those moments, either as a son wanting to have those moments with their dad, or if you are a dad, to make that effort to try to have those real moments with their kids. I know my brother's doing a great job with his kids with that, and he's in the military. He's a doctor with the Navy, and so he's overseas. He's been on deployments, but every time that he has an opportunity to take the kids out into the woods and troop around and things like that, and he's doing a really good job with that, which is awesome. But there's more in those stories, and the more that you listen, the more that you can kind of find those things and then bring value to other people.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
It's not being nosy, just being attentive, listening to what other people say on their podcasts, and listening to someone else's podcast. You kind of know what to ask. Just avoiding that. I'm going to have this name on my podcast. I don't know what to ask them, so I'm going to ask very general questions about how they got started and this and that, and just we're just going to BS back and forth. There can definitely be some awesome stuff in the BS, but I think you definitely have to have some areas that you kind of want to go. That's my preference. Different people have different preferences. You can do whatever you want with your podcast, but I think one of the things that kind of helped me go with this is just that level of interest in people, and then also where I want to take it. I'm just much more engaged throughout the week. I'm thinking about different angles and things, and I think that's what's helped me go. I've mentioned before that there were a couple of times where I thought, I'm not going to have a podcast this week, but 1 week turns into 2 really quick, and then 3, and then all of a sudden you're not doing it anymore. And if it's something that you really want to do, then you got to find ways to follow through. And so just being constantly on the lookout for different people that I want to talk to, It doesn't have to be a big name. It can be someone that's super interesting. I've talked to a lot of people in Alaska on my podcast that, haven't been on any other podcasts, or maybe one or two, but they provide such a unique look into living as an Alaskan. Everybody comes up to Alaska and tells their story, or they're planning their story right now, or they're, posting pictures in anticipation of coming to Alaska. That's awesome. I love to feel that, it makes it new for me, and I love that. But also, who are the people who are around you who are living it, and what are the details about how they're living it that can really make the story better? Some people get really good at talking on podcasts, but if they're not used to talking on podcasts, drawing out those awesome details, like, I know you have an awesome story, so what can I ask to get that out rather than just, general questions? So I just think about that stuff throughout the week, which makes it a lot easier to stay up with the podcast and makes it a lot easier to get things done. And obviously I'm doing a solo podcast because I don't have a guest for this week, but I just can't go a week without it. You just got to keep going with it. Some people have found that, they don't really like doing the podcast. They kind of ran out of steam, or that, life got in the way, and that's totally fine. That's not saying that they're a failure, they're a quitter. But this is something I really want to keep doing. It's pretty fun and it's interesting, and I get to connect with a lot of different people that, I wouldn't be connected with otherwise, which is great. People who help inspire, who, provide purpose, and there's insight, and just I want to keep going with it, which is great. And I think sometimes you can look on social media and you can read in newspapers and watch the news and just find these misery entrepreneurs and these people who are just taking advantage of all the bad that's in the world right now. And that's all that there is, it seems. So unless you find people who are talking about other things, people are talking about solutions, people are talking about how to add value, talking about people who are going to help make things better, do their part to make things better. That's such a great reminder of how many people out there are like that. You watch social media, it's just negative people. It gets so much easier to be negative and talk about all the problems than it is to do any sort of solution, because you can get so much positive attention, right, for being negative. Here's the problem. Oh, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I was like, yeah. And you get that positive feedback, you get that dopamine, but you haven't done anything. Like, you haven't tried to solve or help or provide any sort of value. There's a lot of people out there who are doing that. And so connect with those people. That's one of the best things. And the podcast is a great excuse to do that. And then just a great way of expression. And then same thing with writing. So just a fun thing to stay with. So I think there's some tips in there about staying with the podcast. And I know there's some people who are probably starting out and they want to start their podcast and think they have a good plan, and maybe they're planning out their first 5 episodes. You just got to go. You just got to go. You got to do it. You got to find out what's good and what's not. And so when it does suck, you can say, well, it sucked because of this, and then you can address it and you can move forward. I'll call that this episode. I could try to keep these under 20 minutes, and I want to make sure I do that. I'm going to go have some breakfast and then start my day here in Laramie. Actually, I guess I have started my day because I'm podcasting, but it's fun to be down here in Laramie. It's different. People think that leaving Alaska during the peak of the king season is crazy, but, Alaska doesn't have, it's not the only place. Like, Alaska is awesome. I love living there. I love Ketchikan. I love everything about it, except for the rain and cold, of course, but like, no place is perfect. You have to, there has to be a balance. But, Alaska doesn't have a monopoly on great things. We're going to head to the Bighorn Mountains this weekend, and there's some awesome trout fishing up there and some great camping opportunities and hiking. So, that's great. That's going to be fun. I'm really going to enjoy that. And then to do it all with my wife is it's great. I'm so excited about all the things and the adventures and things like that we have going forward. So call that episode 209. And make sure you check out the mediocrealaskan.com. Go to amiserableparadise.com to order my book, or you can go on Amazon and order it there. Actually, don't go to amiserableparadise.com because I'm sold out of books. I just got a big order, and so I'm waiting on more books from the publisher, which is a rough place to be. That's a bad place for me. I should have ordered enough books, but it's a good problem to have, I guess. So talk to you next time. Thanks again for listening, and later.